How's it going, everyone? It's Kenneth here, and it is Christmas morning, so Merry Christmas to everyone. Not that I'll be uploading this video today, I don't think, but nevertheless, I hope you had a good day, whatever it is you're doing, with family, friends, whatever. And I wanted to speak today about all of our seeds for next year that we've bought, as well as what we grew this year. What kind of worked, what didn't work, and maybe some of the reasons why we think those didn't work. And I also want to use this video as a sort of a platform for people that watch it to give their feedback and say, well, oh, we also grew that and it worked, and this is what we think we did right or what we did wrong. And also to give us advice, because we might have done stuff completely wrong. As you may know, all of the seeds that we have used, most of them, not all of them, most of them have come from the Real Seed catalogue, and we bought pretty much all of them again this year from there. So, you know, this isn't sponsored by them or anything like that, so I'll give complete honest feedback about what worked for us, what we didn't like and what we did like. And maybe you can use that to sort of give yourself some ideas about what you want to buy and what you want to try as well. A lot about what you grow on allotment depends on what you want to eat, what you enjoy growing, your little local climate, and what works well for you. So hopefully this gives you a good idea. Okay, so what did we grow last year? I don't remember, I mean, I know kind of in the back of my head everything that we grew, and I've done videos on it as well, so I'll leave them up there or down in the description, wherever, but you can actually go see everything that we bought last year. And if you've watched the videos throughout summer, you would have seen the stuff we planted anyway. But we grew like 3 different varieties of carrots, 2 different varieties of beetroot, 1 variety of bush tomato, some radish, spring onions, some climbing beans, you know, just general stuff. And a lot of the stuff we grew was what I would think is generally easy things to grow. And like, you know, courgettes, everyone knows, we've done a podcast about that and shown how many we actually grew, and I think everyone is in the same sort of position when it comes to growing courgettes. Some of the stuff we grew as well, I would say would be a bit more difficult. So brassicas, I don't know about anyone else's experience, but I find them quite tricky to grow. You know, they're quite susceptible to pests, and a lot of our brassicas failed this year for a variety of reasons, I think, but we might have done stuff slightly wrong. Anyway, I'll get into that. So I've got a list here of everything I want to talk about. What didn't work too well? So like I said, brassicas. We got a variety of kale called Sutherland kale, and I'm not going to look it up now on the internet, it's going to take too much time, but I think it's from Sutherland, which I believe is quite far up north, so it's used to really, really cold weather. And if you live in England, you know we had a really, really, really hot summer. And I don't know if that's the reason why it didn't work out that well for us, but we got 1 picking from it when it was still quite small, and it was quite tasty, you know, really nice. You know, you kind of stir fry it down. I didn't eat it raw or anything like that, but after that it got really tough and it just wasn't nice at all. The leaves were really big. I don't know, it just didn't really suit us. I don't think we'll ever grow that again. I've read reviews about people that have said it's absolutely amazing and really, really hardy, which it is, but for us it just didn't work that well. Again, whether or not it was because of the hot summer or maybe we, you know, just wasn't to our tasting, but that's fine. You know, you're not going to like everything you grow. In terms of brassicas, something else that really didn't work well was the quick heading Calabrese. Now, we were really, really looking forward to that because we planted quite a lot, probably like 20 or 30 of them, which meant that we would have enough to take home for a couple of months, or a month at least. And the problem we ran into, again, I believe, was because of the heat. And part of that might have been that maybe we didn't water it enough or water them enough, which I think we did. You know, we watered them almost every day, or every day, sometimes twice a day, a bit in the morning and a bit in the evening because it was so hot. But what happened with ours was the plants got really big, which is kind of typical for that kind of variety. The heads of the Calabrese got about that big, maybe the size of a golf ball at the top, and then within a week or so, every single one bolted. Without fail, we did not have one. I guess it's because of the heat, like I said earlier, but I'm not 100% sure. So, you know, we still have some seeds left of that, so we'll probably try to grow them again next year because, you know, this next summer might be slightly different, so maybe we'll have a bit of luck with that. I'm not 100% sure, but, you know, it's a bit of a disappointment. But that's kind of the nature of growing vegetables. You know, it is not always going to work in your favor, and because weather is so variable and changes all the time, it can change very quickly. You just don't know what you're going to get, basically. So hopefully next year we have a bit more luck with those. A few others that didn't work well. Okay, so sprouts, again with the brassicas, they were doing incredibly well, and then towards the end of summer, we went down to the allotment after about 2 weeks, and we noticed like this white that looked like ash on them. So we're like, oh, that's weird, because you weren't really supposed to have fires on the allotments at that point. But we went closer, and they were basically all covered in whitefly, like absolutely covered. That's why I said it looked like ash. And we don't know how long they were on there for, because like I said, we hadn't been there for about 2 weeks. And we managed to get most of them off. They kept on coming back though, like sort of every couple of days. And I'm not too sure if that sort of stunted their growth or affected them in any way, but we just haven't really had much luck with sprouts either. So I can't remember the variety we got, but you know, the plants are really sturdy, really nice. The Brussels sprouts look really nice. They got to about that big, you know, so like maybe the size of a marble, a bit bigger than that. And yeah, and they just started going a bit weird. Like, I can't really explain it. The leaves started opening and they were extending out, and I don't really know. You know, it might just be our inexperience with sprouts. Like, I've never grown sprouts before, so we'll try them again next year. Like I said, we also have seeds left over for those. And what we will do to sort of experiment and see, maybe it was us, maybe it was a pest, is actually make sure they're covered properly. You get this stuff called veggie mesh, and I used to use it in my garden, and I made a little video about it. I can leave that up there as well. It's super fine, and from what I remember, it's supposed to like block almost all pests that you can get, so like carrot fly, aphids, everything. So it blocks everything, butterflies, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's really fine, still lets water and light through. And that might be something that we have to do for the sprouts next year, and all of the brassicas maybe, to prevent any pests on them. We also grew some oca, which we were really looking forward to, and unfortunately, it does say on the Real Seed Catalog's website, if you do have an early frost, you shouldn't grow them, because they only start forming sort of like halfway through November, the bulbs at least. And we generally don't have early frost here in Gloucestershire, not that I can remember. But again, the weather's been really strange, and it must have been sometime like in the beginning of October. I can't remember exactly when. If you're anything like me, all the damn days sort of blend into each other. But we had a really super cold snap, and there was a pretty bad frost. And then very shortly after, all the oca plants died. So when we dug them up at the end of November, well no, it wasn't even in November, it was kind of into December, there was loads and loads of oca, but it was again really small, like, you know, the size of a marble, something like that, which is unfortunate. You know, it's just one of those things. I think if we didn't have that frost, we probably would have had a decent crop from them, but we have decided not to grow that next year, just because we don't really want to waste the space on a vegetable that you plant in the beginning of the year and it takes all year to grow, and you know, the returns aren't that great. We'd have to grow a fair amount if it was going to sustain all of us, or be enough for all of us on the allotment. Some of the other things that didn't do too well were our climbing beans, French climbing beans. Again, I think this is probably down to us. We built a climbing frame for them, and they sort of, I think they were called telephone. No, those are peas. Anyway, it's a tall growing variety, and they got really tall, but they were kind of crowded at the base with a whole bunch of other plants we planted, like tomatoes and peppers and chard and things like that. And as a result, we didn't get many beans. We probably had like 2 harvests off them, which was a bit disappointing. It possibly could have been that we also didn't plant enough. So we only planted 1 bean plant per stake or string going up. And after reading back on it, you can plant up to 2, I think, from what it said, which would have doubled our crop basically. So we could have had 4 pickings. Again, it might have just been down to not having the right nutrients in the soil, because at one point the leaves did go yellow. Which, what is that? Is that nitrogen? Lack of nitrogen? No, not nitrogen. I don't know, something. So, you know, we're still building up the soil, we're still putting fertilizer, like we use organic chicken pellets, chicken manure pellets, obviously compost, and things like that, because when we took the allotment on, it was in a bit of a state. So maybe next year we need to pay a bit more attention on giving the right nutrients to different plants, because we didn't really do much except for the tomatoes, really. We gave them like some tomato grow. But again, we're disappointed with those, unfortunately, but we do have some seeds left over, so we'll try those again next year and do it slightly differently and hopefully have a better result. And that's kind of the good thing about gardening. You know, you can keep trying things until you find what works for you, and what might work for us might not work for someone else. It might be completely different for someone else because they've got different soil, or they've got different pest problems in the area, whatever. It doesn't, you know, it could be any sort of factor that changes it. The last thing we didn't really have, I'll take all that off. The last thing we didn't really have much success for at all were our sweet peppers, and we got the lipstick variety, I think. Again, really looking forward to those, and we probably had about 12 plants, maybe a bit less, I can't remember. And unfortunately, I think this one was down to us. So we planted them in pots using soil and compost, and we gave them some sort of liquid feed every now and then. But what would happen was the peppers would get to sort of like a chili size, so maybe, what's that, like 8, 10 centimeters, something like that, 3 or 4 inches. And the ends, the tips started rotting. I was like, what the hell's going on here? Did a bit of research, and I think it's something called blossom end rot, which is, I believe, and I might be wrong, a deficiency in calcium in the soil. So again, that's probably our fault. We just kind of planted them and hoped for the best without really knowing what we were doing. And by the time we started trying to remedy the problem, it was too late. If anyone's got any tips on what to do to grow peppers, because we'd really like to try them again. You know, peppers are amazing. You know, you can use them in a lot of different dishes and things like that. Let us know down below in the comments. But it's a real pity, because they were massively prolific. I mean, there must have been, on some of the plants, I don't know, 10, 15 peppers, easily. And like I said, we had about 10 or 12 plants, so we would have had hundreds, or 100 or so. And I'm sure if they were growing to the proper size and they weren't rotting and we were picking them, we probably would have had more, because the plant would have carried on producing, I think. So just to sort of quickly go over what didn't work well, some of the reasons and the possibilities why they didn't work well could be things like we were growing things in pots, like the chilies, maybe the peppers. Maybe we shouldn't have grown them in pots and actually put them directly in the ground. The weather, it was uncharacteristically hot. In fact, it was probably the hottest summer since I've lived here. It's been 9 years now. Or at least the hottest spell of hot weather in a row. Like, I think we had 8-9 weeks or something like that of really hot weather. So that's one of the reasons that some of the pests, the varieties could have failed or not worked. And then there's pests. So something I didn't mention was the broad beans. Ours got completely obliterated by black fly, unfortunately, and we probably had about 10 broad beans each from all of the ones we planted. But again, we've got a few left over of those, so we can try those again. Inexperience with growing vegetables that are slightly more trickier and need a bit more attention than just things like carrots and tomatoes. And then us doing something wrong, just like inexperience, you know, not putting the right kind of fertilizer down, or not looking after the plants properly, whatever it is. But that's all part of the learning experience. So next year, some of the things we might try again, and some of them we won't. But now that we know what didn't work this year, we can amend what we do next year and change what we do and experiment and try something else, and hopefully it works. And if it doesn't, we'll just know one other thing that doesn't work. Okay, so now on to a bit more of a positive note. What worked well? So the stuff that really worked well would be things that I would consider slightly more easier to grow. So we had 3 varieties of carrots, 2 varieties of beetroot, 1 variety of bush tomato, cucamelons, spring onions, radish, chilies, chard, and a few other things that did exceptionally well. I mean, we picked our last carrots. When did we pick our last carrots? Beginning of December, something like that. And the truth is, we would have actually had more, because we planted a whole bed of carrots just in time for them to be overwintered. I can't remember exactly when it was. So we had about 4 rows of carrots ready to go, and they all came up, and then all of the leaves got eaten. I don't know by what, but the funny thing is, they were in the same bed that our broad beans were, that all got killed or obliterated by black flies. So maybe there's something in that bed, I don't know, who knows. But unfortunately, so those carrots didn't make it. Otherwise, we would have had them all the way probably into like January, you know, because we could just pick them as we needed them, as long as we sort of covered them with some fleece or something like that. Beetroot, again, did really, really well. We've still got some pickled in the fridge that we're kind of eating every now and then. I will say one thing, out of the two varieties we got Sanguina beetroot, which we've actually got again this year, and we got the Touchstone Gold or whatever, Touch Gold, I don't know, the orange variety. And that one didn't do that well. It seemed to take a lot longer to grow, and we didn't get as big bulbs or big beetroots from them as we did with the red ones. Now, we tried a few different ways of planting the beetroot. We did plugs and transplanted them in, and we direct seeded them, and we sort of, what else did we do? I can't even remember. Yeah, direct seeded them, plugs, and then in some of the plugs we put 2 or 3 seeds, or beetroot seeds, but I think there's more than 1 seed per beetroot seed. I don't know. Anyway, and they all kind of worked well for the red ones, but not so much for the orange ones. I don't know why, but we decided not to grow them this year, and instead we got the albino white variety. I can't remember, something like that. And to give those a go and see what those are like. Yeah. So, oh yes, I forgot to say this one here. Kohlrabi. Now, that is a brassica, and it we had so much luck with that. We did two successions, and we had loads and loads and loads of them. They grow really, really quickly. They seem to be massively resistant to pests, at least where we were. We planted them in 2 different parts of the allotment as well, and one of the parts was the one that was affected by whitefly with the Brussels sprouts. Obviously the kohlrabi were already pulled out the ground by them, but the variety we got was Azure Blue or whatever, something like that. We've got some more of those for next year as well, and we're definitely, you know, saved from this year. And we're definitely going to grow those again, because they're really, really prolific, easy to grow really quickly, and it's satisfying because, you know, you can pick them as you need them. And we probably had kohlrabi at least for a month, maybe even more than that. We're picking them all the time, giving them to friends and family as well, neighbours, things like that. So all of those are quite, all of those varieties I've just spoken about, quite good to grow if you have just started growing vegetables and have just got allotment. You know, I think it's kind of important to try grow easier things, just to get that satisfaction of seeing stuff grow and knowing that it's actually possible, before you jump into the really tricky things that, you know, might fail, and then you kind of feel, oh, you know, what's the point, and just sort of give it up. One thing I want to say about the tomatoes, now again, this might have been down to us or the hot weather. We got, I can't remember the variety, got it somewhere. Anyway, we saved loads of seeds from them. It was a bush variety, and they were pink. Anyway, they were really, really prolific, but they seemed to take really, really long to ripen. Now, we weren't 100% sure of that while that was happening. We looked up online. It said it could be different minerals in the soil and all that kind of stuff, and so we gave it some different fertilizer specifically for tomatoes, and eventually they did start ripening. But we noticed on a lot of the tomatoes, especially the ones kind of at the top and on the outsides, the skin started splitting all the way around the top, like a little ring or halo. I'm like, oh, what the hell's that, you know? And it's not like we threw them away, because the skin kind of almost stitched itself back together, and it left a mark, but we still ate them, and they were still really, really tasty. But it could have been a lack of nutrients again. It could have been the fact that we weren't watering them enough. Although I thought we were, you know, we watered them pretty much every day, or every day at least, sometimes in the morning and sometimes in the evening. But someone mentioned, I can't remember where it was, on Instagram or something like that, that it could be heat, where it just got really hot and the skin splits, and then, you know, that's what happens basically. So we'll grow those again next year and see what happens. Maybe we'll have a different result. The other thing I would mention about those is that they're supposed to be like a plum or heart-shaped kind of tomato, and we definitely had some weird shaped ones. We had ones that were like that big, like beef tomatoes. We had ones that were slightly smaller, like cherry tomatoes, and then we had a few that looked like they should have looked. Now I don't know if that's just a normal thing with tomatoes, or this variety, you know, maybe they're not, the shape of them isn't that consistent. Maybe it was just us. Again, I don't really know, but we did save seeds from them, and we'll try grow them next year and see what happens. You know, maybe we get a different result, who knows, but we'll definitely try something a bit different, you know, see what happens. Okay, so before I get on to what we bought for next year, I want to have a quick chat about what we'll grow, which I've kind of mentioned as we've spoken, about what we'll grow again next year. And it comes down to a couple of things. So first of all, one of the things I think is the most important is growing things that you want to eat and things you enjoy growing. You know, that makes sense. There's no point in really growing stuff that you don't like, or, you know, you find a pain or a hassle and you don't really want to grow. You know, some vegetables require a lot more work than others. So, you know, if you're growing vining tomatoes, you need to, you know, stake them up as they go. What's the word I'm looking for? Keep them supported as they grow up, or, you know, turn them around some string or something like that, or a cane. You need to cut all the suckers off and prune them, and, you know, it's a bit more work involved. But if you don't really want to do all of that and you just want to leave stuff to grow, then I wouldn't suggest doing it. I mean, what we're also trying to aim for with what we're growing again is increasing the diversity of the kind of vegetables we grow, because we would like to get to the point where we don't have to buy that much vegetables. That's part of the fun of having an allotment. Part of the reason of having one is being slightly more self-sufficient and having your own locally grown, organically grown, if you want to call it that, vegetables. So the stuff we're kind of keeping from last year is going to add to the diversity of the stuff we have this year. So hopefully every week we can go down, we'll be able to eat stuff seasonally, pick what we need for that week, and have enough for our own little small families to not have to buy that much stuff. So that's what we're aiming for. Now, I'm going to quickly shoot off a list of everything we bought this year. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail for every single variety. If you want to, you can go onto the Real Seed Catalogue website and read about them. We selected some of the varieties for very specific reasons. So whether it be for a cold climate or for the space that we have, for our preferences, what we like, all that kind of thing. And yeah, they all have very specific sort of characteristics, but I'm not going to go through them because this video, which is already going to be relatively long, or podcast if you're listening to this, I don't want to make it sort of hours and hours. So in alphabetical order, I think, we have aubergine, albino beetroot, autumn and winter cabbage, carrot, which is a dragon purple variety, Paris pickling cucumber, hot pepper, onivich, something like that, asparagus kale, East Frisian palm kale, a mixed variety of lettuce, hardy leek, Minnesota midget, which sounds politically incorrect, but is a small cantaloupe melon, shallot, Hokkaido winter squash, Burgess butternut winter squash, which we grew this year, and it was amazing. Very easy to grow, very small vines, very prolific. Victor winter squash, early prolific straight neck summer squash, Costoluto Fiorentino vine tomato, which comes from Florence, I think, in Italy, and it's kind of like a bumpy kind of beef looking thing. It just looked cool and we thought we'd grow that. I think there was another reason as well. Sanguina beetroot, which is the same variety we grew this year, tender and true parsnip, golden sweet yellow podded mange tout, Greek gigantus soup runner bean, double red sweet corn, and that is it. Now, this list is only limited to the stuff that we can start planting earlier on in the year. What we want to do next year, like I said earlier, is first of all increase the diversification of the stuff we grow, so we have enough variety of vegetables every week to not have to buy stuff, or not have to buy as much stuff. We're trying to grow some really interesting varieties, so let's try to think here. Yeah, so for example, East Frisian palm kale, this one over here. Can you see that? No, not that one, sorry, asparagus kale, this one. That is a hardy green-grey kale that has been selected for its profusion of tender shoots in spring. It just looked really interesting, so we thought we'd give that a go. We're also trying different varieties to see what works best. So we got, let's see, we got a different variety of chili. Unfortunately, we didn't really save any seed from the chilies that we grew this year, which is unfortunate. We should have done really, because saving chili seeds is really easy. But the variety we got is an early and very hot pepper loaded with fruit up to a foot long, which is insane, and 2 inches wide, starting a wonderful pale yellow and ripening through orange to red. Now, the cool thing about these is Lydia wasn't massively keen on really hot chilies, but from what we read on the website, it said that when they are pale yellow, they're actually quite mild, and as they change colour, they get hotter. So that's quite cool. You know, we'll be able to pick them as they change colours, which is going to be quite cool. And the fact that they are so long means we're going to have abundance of them, hopefully, if they work well. Again, the aubergine, we wanted to try that because it's something we all kind of like. It's really diverse in what you can do with it. You can bake it, you can fry it, you can put it in sort of like stews and things like that. And it's just an interesting vegetable to try grow. The tomatoes, now I'll speak a bit more about tomatoes later because I've actually bought several varieties, I think 6 or 7 for myself that I'll be trying at home, but obviously we'll use some on the allotment, but that's for a whole different reason. I'll talk about that a bit later. But we got vine tomatoes this year rather than bush tomatoes. First of all, because we have some bush tomatoes from the seeds we saved, but we wanted to try grow stuff in the polytunnel or the, what do you call that thing? Greenhouse, which we still have not put up. It's becoming a bloody saga. We've had it for months now. We're trying to get a weekend we can get the whole thing up. But now that we've got 2 sort of growing structures, we want to try grow stuff in there, like the aubergines, chilies, and the vining tomatoes, rather than have to grow tomatoes outside. As a side note, that's part of the reason we got the bush tomatoes last year. What else have I got here? Let's see. Oh yeah, we're also experimenting. So we've got a whole bunch of new things to experiment to see what works. So like, for example, where have I got them here? Minnesota midget, the small cantaloupe melon. Now they're a sweet melon and we don't really have any fruit on the allotment. And we thought it'd be really cool to try. So first of all, they're quite small. So they don't have a massively, well I don't think they'll have a massively long growing season, because obviously the bigger a vegetable is, the more time it takes to grow. But again, this adds variety to what we get to pick every week. It's something different, and hopefully we get to save a bit of seeds and, you know, keep growing them in the years to come. Trying to think of something else that was unusual. So the Paris pickling cucumber. We were sort of talking between 2 different varieties, and the reason we went for this one is kind of like twofold. Is first of all, it's meant for pickling, as it says in the name, and the cool thing about that is you can grow a whole bunch, pickle them, and then you've got gherkins, I guess you call them, pickling cucumbers, for months to come, rather than just having them for the season they grow. The second reason is not everyone likes cucumbers, so not all of us down there like cucumbers. So we can use these for pickling gherkins, but if anyone wants to have cucumbers, you can actually let these grow bigger and then eat them like cucumbers. It does say though that the skin gets really tough, so you'd have to peel them off and, you know, cut them up like that, which is fine. That doesn't really make a difference, but that's sort of got a dual purpose. So that was quite interesting. We thought we'd give that a go. We did grow peas last year, and that was a bit of a nightmare. Again, I've made videos about that, and we had some really crazy weather, and you know, that was a bit unfortunate. But the one thing I have to say, although the peas were really prolific and they did really well, it is an absolute ball ache, excuse my language, taking the pods off, and I just don't want to mess around doing that. You know, you can just buy them in the shop frozen, and you can get some relatively good quality ones for relatively cheap, and I just find that easier. They are way too cheap, and life is way too short to screw around trying to take pods off peas. It's just not worth it. So we got these Mange 2, a yellow variety, golden sweet, because you can just eat the whole thing. And so we're really looking forward to that. Hopefully it'll save us a whole bunch of time. Now, back to the peas, not to say we're not going to grow them next year, because we did save a whole bunch. And peas are good for the soil, you know, is it peas? Well, I suppose any legumes, they kind of correct the nitrogen in the soil. So we are growing them again. We're just going to change how we do them slightly. And then we don't all have to have peas. So if one of us wants to take 1 week, we can, but we'll have the Manche 2 to offset that. Let me try to see what else. Yeah, so we also decided to take that off, doing anymore. We also decided to try grow a bit more winter variety this year, and there will still be some more stuff we sort of order maybe May, June for overwintering. Greens especially. So like a lot of the oriental greens are really good for growing over winter. But you know, it's at the point now in the year we've got nothing on the allotment except onions and garlic, which we'll only harvest next year. And like I said earlier, part of the reason we want to have the allotment is to kind of be a bit self-sufficient. So things like the leek will be a winter vegetable that when we grow these next year, hopefully we'll have leek to be picking from now until early 2020. Same goes for the parsnip, the shallots, and then the winter squash. So I mean kale as well, you pick over winter, I guess. We did grow this Burgess butternut squash, and if anyone wants to, is that focusing? And if anyone wants to try a variety of winter squash, I would, and you've got a small allotment, I would definitely recommend these. They grow really, really well. They were resistant to all sorts of pests and powdery mildew. And we got a fair amount of squash from them. They're not too big, not too small. They're absolutely perfect. So we're going to grow those again this year. Unfortunately, we didn't save seeds from them. It's one of those things, it's easy to do, but we just didn't get around to it. Again, I'm not going to explain how you do it. It's all on the website and on their list of things when you buy from them. We bought two other kinds of winter squash. So Victor winter squash and Hokkaido winter squash. Again, we wanted to have those so that, there we go. Is that focusing? Yeah, we wanted to get more winter squash so we had more variety of food over winter again. And I can't remember, I'm pretty sure all of these store pretty well. So, you know, if we get like 6 or 7 each, that could last 6 or 7 or 8, 9 weeks over winter as long as we store them properly. And we got the summer squash we got was kind of like a courgette, but it was a different variety. Just because courgettes are great, but they, you know, they get a bit boring sometimes, especially when you get trillions of them off one bloody plant every year. So we thought we'd try something a bit different. So that's why we got this straight neck summer squash. It kind of looks a bit bulbous at the one end and a bit knobbly, you know, so it's quite interesting. Trying to think. That's about it really. You know, I did rail that list off really quickly. I'll try to list them on the video somewhere on the screen, and in the description below, so that you can go and look up on them and read a bit more. But you know, hopefully what we have here will increase the diversity of what we have next year, like I've said about 500 times already. The last couple of things I want to talk about are again about increasing diversity. But now that we have 2 allotments, obviously we've doubled our space, and I think we have about 250 square meters, something like that ish. I have to measure it still, but I think it's about that much. Which means we can grow more things like potatoes, onions and garlic, which take a bit longer to grow and take up more space. But it also means that we can plant fruit trees next year. Now, the rules I think would vary from allotment site to allotment site, but on our allotment site, you're allowed to have 3 trees per allotment. Now that we have 2, we can have 6. Now, a little birdie told me that they aren't massively strict on that. So if you had 7 or 8 on 2 allotments, they would kind of turn their nose up and just pretend you didn't. As long as you're looking after your allotment, you're maintaining it and you're spending time there. If you had a whole bunch of trees and were just never there, or had 2 allotments and had 50 trees on them, they might get a bit funny. But we're not 100% sure what fruit trees we're going to grow yet. We've got one already, a green gage that Matt and Katie bought, that we've already planted. And we've cordoned off an area where we're going to have a few trees specifically. I know I haven't made many videos, but we're going down to the allotment fairly regularly, you know, and we're building beds and getting it all ready for next year. And we've got to the point now where we've pretty much solidly planned our second one, where exactly everything's going to go. We do have 1 big bed, a medium-sized bed, and 4 small beds already there. But now we've kind of really hashed it out and we've got everything sorted now. So yeah, hopefully the fruit trees are gonna increase our diversity as well. And the last thing I want to speak about is, I mentioned I've got a whole bunch of tomatoes. that I'll be growing at home. Now, I'm not just going to be growing tomatoes at home, I've got a whole bunch of other things which I'll speak about in a completely separate video. But that's like a little project I'm working on next year that will hopefully, I'll be able to make extra videos about. Something I've spoken about in the past briefly. I think I mentioned I was building a website, which I've been doing for a while. It's kind of ready. I've got a name for it and everything. I just need to get a logo sorted out. But I'll speak about that more in another video. But that's also it's part of an experiment, you know, trying to see what vegetables work here and what don't, what varieties work and what don't. But I'll speak about that in another video. But anyway, I know this is really long. If you haven't watched it and you've listened to it, that's great. Thank you very much. But I really wanted to chat about what worked for us and what didn't, because not everything is always perfect when you grow vegetables. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, leave it in the comments below, because I'd like to hear all of your advice and all of your experiences. That's part of why I'm doing these videos. I hope you guys have had a good Christmas and have a good New Year, or have had a good New Year whenever you're watching this. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much. See you later. My battery's just about to go dead as well. This is perfect timing.